Welcome to another episode of Inspired Content. I'm not feeling my best right now, but we'll try to do this. In this episode, I'll be doing another products and services, and in this case, I'm going into something that I did a while back, and I felt it would be worth sharing for creative peoples. As I was younger and I was working on a lot of art projects and things, one of the things that came up a lot was I use a lot of hand tools at first, and it seems alright until you get access to something that can give you a little more speed and control. And so a family member gave me a gift of a dremel rotary tool. This one is a Multi-Pro cordless 7.2 volt model 770 type 1. And this tool actually did a lot of good work for me. But one of the things that came along and using it was the battery was something I always had a little bit of a trouble with, as I could get maybe an hour's worth of work out of it before I'd have to plug it back in. And several years after using it, I don't know if the battery or the motor started to go, but one of the two of them started to go, and there is no easy way to replace that. I could replace this model maybe with a comparable model, and it's going to cost 30 or 40 bucks. But at the time I was looking at the possibility of maybe upgrading, because one of the things I wanted to do is, despite the fact that this is not too bad for my relatively large hands to use as a scribing tool, it's still a little clunky for use, whereas there are flex shaft tools that give you like a pen style tip that you can work with. That's much easier to work with, but they need a decent power motor on it, and this is not powerful enough motor to drive that. In fact, towards the end of the lifetime of this item, even slight pressure on wood would bring a drill bit to a screeching halt. So I looked at the possibility of upgrading to a better model, and it looked like the price on a better model would be 40 to 60 bucks minimum. And toss in the dedicated rotary tool flex shaft, and you're talking about at least 100 bucks in some cases. And it served me well, and I was willing to maybe make that choice, but something came to my attention that I thought was definitely something more along the ways I wanted to go, and that was this is the Black & Decker RTX 3-speed rotary tool, and I found this one on Amazon, and it does a couple things that are more suited to my liking. First of all, I can use it as long as I want to, because I'm not going to run out of battery power. If I really want to make this portable, I can build a little rig that I can plug this into that's run off of like a car battery. I got plenty of charge time off of a car battery if I want to do that. But it's a little bit bigger, but it also has a lot more power in settings, and it's adjustable settings. Okay, so the Dremel has basically a 7,500 RPMs or a 15,000 RPM setting. That's low. That's medium. That's medium. Whew. And that's full speed. That's high. The RPMs, it's a 2 amp, 120 volt AC only. RPMs, it says 12,000, 24,000, and 30,000 RPMs. Now, depending on who you talk to, a lot of those statistics can oftentimes be a little salesman-y, so they're not always going to be correct. But it definitely has more kick and punch to it than than the speeds on the Dremel rotary tool. But one of the key features for this one for me is it takes almost all of the Dremel rotary tool bits. This is a Dremel rotary tool chuck for putting in bits instead of using the colettes. And the chuck bits perfectly. And it has this feature on the Dremel. You have a button you have to push in and hold in to keep the bits from spinning. This one has a self-locking. You can do it one-handed, which is super handy. It's a very easy tool to hook up, and now I can just remove the bit and go into other sets. It takes, the chuck will take all the drill bits that Dremel uses. It'll use brushes. It'll use any of the mandrels. Should be able to use any of the saw bits if you have a mandrel for the saw bits, the grinders. But on top of that, the possibility of using this with other tool pieces that are not specifically targeted towards the Dremel is also there. And Dremel can be a little restrictive on what you can and can't get away with using in their machines. This one gives you options that you wouldn't maybe get with a Dremel tool. But one of the other options I wanted to try here is the flex shaft rotary tool. And I got them both off of Amazon. I got the Black & Decker and I got the flex shaft both on Amazon. The Black & Decker, which one of the other features that made it totally worthwhile to me, was a third the price of the same power level in a Dremel. I mean, maybe that's because it's not a cordless and battery powered item, but you know, that works for me for the most part. Use the collet system on there. And you latch it, tighten it up on the main part of the flex shaft. Let it move freely and secure that. And ta-da! Flex shaft. I mean, it gives me the opportunity to have this front bit, which is much more pen-like and much easier to control. And you've got the collet in there for the fine control. No, the chuck does not fit on the end of the flex shaft, which is unfortunate, but it's not a huge loss. If it takes the colettes from the Dremel here. In total on all of that was 30 bucks. Alright, so ideas for how to use the Black & Decker tool, and possibly even the idea of the flex shaft and the Dremel bits. Number 1. Mini tabletop versions of a woodwork shop for making dollhouse furnishings. I can kind of see the possibility of making a mini lathe to make like beads or even like tiny spindles for dollhouse furniture. But at the same time, I can also see taking one of the Dremel saw blades and making a mini version of a table saw, or even like a mill to take big pieces of basswood and trim them like you would run them through a mill for making siding for a dollhouse, and just use it like a sled on a table saw, but it'd be a small one that you can put on top of a tabletop and cut mini pieces out of. I can see this being useful for doing some simple glass work, being able to cut edges that break unevenly for stained glass where you use the glass cutter and you get a crook at the end of it, being able to clean that edge off. But also, it occurs to me as a possibility of being able to use this feature to cut bottles in a way. I mean, there are ways to do it where you can get a relatively good chance of an even break, but when you get some of those chips and dings, to be able to grind those edges down evenly. Okay, this is where I start to get a little weird, I think, but I'd be curious to see, with a few tinkerings, if I could rig something up like a mini cotton candy maker. Just use that motor, plug it into a side of it, just tighten it onto a piece and turn it on, and turn your heating elements on and spin out the candy floss or the cotton candy, and flavor it any way you want to. I kind of want to experiment with that, I think. I have this sense that there's got to be a way to do... You ever see those scratch board art pieces that you can make where you've got a hard layer of something white or silver or gold underneath, and then a thin layer of like India ink over top of it, and you just scratch off the dark layer and you get the light layer underneath. And I'm like, this should be relatively easy to do. I'm thinking just a thin layer of plaster of Paris with a little bit of darkening on the surface of it, and then scratch through the darkening. I can see doing that on curved surfaces, making your own scratch card really easily. A method of winding together multiple wires. If you wanted to do a twist of wire that would be silver and gold, you can run them into this and just twist them together. But it's also a means of making things like bottle brushes, and I've seen people who demoed methods for making trees for miniature gaming, and you could do it for doll houses, or even make little Christmas tree earrings or something by just taking the green material, like a sisal twine or something like that, and fraying it, and then laying it between two pieces of wire, and then twisting those wires rapidly with the motor on the tool. Just set up a simple rig for making those brush and tree and other kind of wound wire pieces. But you could also make thicker wire that are multi-stranded wires to give a filigree look to works that you're working on for wire jewelry. I had this idea while I was playing with the flex shaft, and I mean, the Dremel is something where I could put a blade on the end of the flex shaft and have a blade on the end of the flex shaft. But I got to thinking of ways to use it in the kitchen. And yeah, you can use it as a mixer, that's not a big inspiration there. But I got to wondering, if I took a wire whisk, like you can sometimes find in the kitchen, where it's just essentially a cage, and I feel like if you got a small enough, thin enough size, and inside that you put a spinning blade with the flex shaft that runs up a long twisted handle, could you possibly get a flex shaft blender? Like, I'm thinking of taking like a watermelon, putting a hole in the side of the watermelon, and then going inside and just hollowing out the insides of the watermelon with a flex shaft, and pour in some vodka or something, and you can drink the contents out and then have a hollow watermelon shell or something. But being able to do this with all sorts of foods, I'm curious if I could do it, and I kind of want to try. I have very little use for hollowed out watermelon, but there's got to be a way to do something interesting and creative with that, and I got to see if I could do it. It'd be worth trying, I think. Alright, so those are the ideas this time. See you next time.